Welcome to the Mainly Moonology podcast. This week I have a really brilliant guest for you. But before that, let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead, because guess what? This is a new moon week. The new moon is going to be taking place in the sign of Gemini, and some key words and ideas for this lunation are chatty. Well, it's very chatty because Gemini is chatty. Confusing. It is a bit confusing as well because this new moon is actually going to be clashing with the planet of confusion, Neptune. And it's going to be lucky for some because the day after the new moon, we get one of the biggest and best astrological alignments of the year as Jupiter harmonises with Saturn. So it is a bit of a mixed new moon. On the one hand, it could be you come out of it thinking, I just don't know what's going to happen next. On the other hand, it may eventually transpire that all your hard work is paying off. Because of the Neptune clash with the new moon and the fact that the moon goes void of course straight after the new moon, you might want to make your wishes, say, no sooner than about 11 hours after the new moon. I'll just give you the times of the new moon around the world. It's June 18 at 5:37 a.m, Sydney, June 18 at 2:37 p.m, LA Pacific Time, June 17, 9:37 p.m, and New York Eastern Time is June 18 at 37 minutes past midnight. So yes, it's an interesting week. It's an interesting new moon, and I hope you are going to make the best of it. One of the best things to do this week is to think about where have you been working really, really hard in your life on something, and start to look for little signs that your hard work is paying off. Okay, so with all that said, I want to introduce you to this week's guest. His name is Nadav Khan, and he loves to chant. Take it away. Welcome to the Mainly Moonology podcast. I'm your host, Yasmin Boland, an award-winning astrologer and the Sunday Times best-selling author of books including Moonology and creator of the Moonology Oracle cards. My intention for this podcast is to help you understand how you can create your dream life using mainly Moonology, the moon, as your guide.
Om Namo Narayani. Om Namo Narayani. Om Namo Narayani.
Amazing. Well, guys, I don't know about you, but that just gave me goosebumps from head to toe. Thank you, Nadav.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Mainly Moonology podcast. And if you haven't guessed, this week we have someone who chants as our guest, which is a real thrill for me. I've known Nadav for probably, I don't even want to think how long. It must be coming up to 20 years, if it's not already 20 years, Nadav. I don't know.
I'd say it's at least 20 years.
Yeah, it's a long time. And Nadav actually changed my life, but that's kind of a story for another day. He probably doesn't even know about it. I don't know. But that chant was actually a chant from the ashram that we both go to in India. And in fact, it was as a result of a conversation I had with Nadav that I actually went to the ashram for the first time, which changed my life. But let me introduce you to people, Nadav. I'll just kind of give people an outline of who you are and what you do.
Okay.
So
Sure.
Nadav Khan, Nadavkhan, Nadav Khan is an Israeli-born, Australia-based facilitator of sound-based therapy, and we are very big on sound-based therapy here at Mainly Moonology. He specializes in quietening the demands and stress of modern life by empowering individuals to their authentic self-expression through the modality of sound and focused mantra meditation. Okay, so that was a bit of chanting, a bit of mantra we had just now. Nadav is an award-winning singer-songwriter. His first band was signed to EMI Music, leading him to tour the world with various collaborative and solo projects, releasing 12 albums to date. That's amazing. Over the last 20 years, Nadav has spent extensive time in India on a quest for something more. It was here he began to study the mystical powers of music, Vedic chants, and also began his study of Jewish mysticism. It's an interesting place to study Jewish mysticism in India.
Well, and more that it launched the greater exploration of
Right.
different traditions and different systems of thinking. But yeah, not so much that in India, but
The
it
actual
was
study,
certainly
yes.
integrated. Yeah,
Okay, no, that makes sense.
into life.
These experiences have inspired devotional albums, both in Sanskrit and his native tongue, Hebrew. Nadav approaches his music making as a sonic and meditative journey, using his voice as a prayer to quieten the mind, and open the heart. And just by the way, what's the name of the app you're on? Is it Insight Timer? You can catch him on Insight
Oh,
Timer,
yes.
which I know a lot
Yes.
of people have on their phones, but also I'll tell you
Hmm.
other places to find him. Nadav lives in Sydney, where he wears many hats, including singer, kirtanist, cantor, producer, songwriter, teacher, harmonium, and mantra mentor. He's also a wife. No, he's not a wife. He's also a husband and dad. I happen to know,
Yes.
and he's also going to be doing a retreat all about mantra later this year, which we'll tell you about a bit later. But if that's something that interests you, I can tell you it's going to be amazing. And I should also point out, Nadav, for my listeners,
Yeah.
because they all know your brother Edor. So,
Oh.
I'm always playing Edor and Joe's music, which I have Edor
Hmm.
permission to do. Okay, well, this is his brother. So, Nadav, welcome, welcome,
Nice.
welcome to the show. So nice to have you
Thank
here.
you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Nadav, one thing I wanted to kind of ask you before we go too far into mantra, just for people who are listening, to
Yeah.
give them some context about how your life has evolved over the years. Because when I met you, you were kind of this muso guy around Bondi, and you were kind of playing pubs and clubs and, a bit of not necessarily rock and roll, but, not even rock, but not that far from it necessarily. So, tell us, what did you do before you became this kind of mantra guy, and how did that evolution occur? Was it sort of organic? Did you decide on it? Tell us a little bit about how you came to be basically, immersed in mantra.
Okay. Yeah, sure. No, you're absolutely right. When we used to cross paths, before even getting to India, of course, I was really involved in music, and I was just living and breathing music as a musician. And at that time, I was just focused on writing songs and touring with the band, and which was a wonderful experience. It took us all over the world, and was just an amazing thing. And that music was probably more art, rock, pop sort of thing, which is probably why
Yeah,
it's harder to define. It was also had folky acoustic
yeah,
elements, but was kind of also very deeply involved in and I was very interested in experimental music and in sort of the sonic realm of just kind of that sonic space that people could almost bathe in. So that was always
right,
incorporated into music and into ideas of loops and things like that. At the time when all that was really just beginning to start entering a more mainstream kind of realm, because computers weren't being used in the way that they are now to kind of create
right.
music. So it makes me feel very ancient, but but in truth, it was like our samplers were very limited in what they could do, and everything's evolved a lot since then. So yeah, so music was everything, and in some ways still is kind of the conduit by which I live by, but it's sort of broadened, and and the interest in how music works and what it does expanded. But it was really through playing and doing shows and experiencing, how wonderful it was to interact with people through music and to have an exchange with audiences and to keep creating that dynamic and relationship with others through music, that it broadened to kind of then explore, well, what else is music? And without a doubt, hearing some mantras, which came into my life when a friend showed up from India and then ended up becoming my flatmate, and he brought with him a bunch of Indian instruments.
Right.
And we started recording him, and I started producing him with my brother, like his some sitar music and harmonium and things like that. And so I started interacting with some of the
Right.
Indian instruments and more Hindustani music. And then within a few years ended up in India. So suddenly the whole gamut of music and what comes out of India, which is the whole Indian classical, but also the world of mantra and the world
Yeah.
of steeply devotional music, became open to me. And I was already interested because I was a massive Beatles fan, and knowing the Beatles trajectory and their
Yeah.
time in India and how it affected George Harrison, and then some of my favorite Beatles songs, that I just was always drawn to it. And suddenly it was like, oh, I get it. I see why those
Right.
guys, got
Yeah.
completely drawn to this, because
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. It's a whole other spectrum of sound and thinking and relating to the intention of music
Yeah.
beyond just writing songs and being a rock star, which was what I
Yes.
thought I was interested in back then,
Yeah.
and
In fact, I
and was
remember
fulfilling enough then, but
yeah.
clearly became not enough.
I remember the crossover period actually when actually I think it was Idor, your brother, but it might have been you. One of you or both of you said we don't really want to play in pubs and clubs anymore because it's just not the energy we're after. Do you remember
Mm,
that sort of period
yeah.
where you were like, okay, I actually think I want to take my music in a new direction? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely fair. And definitely Ido was way more definitive about that than I was initially. Became very much like, I don't want to be in the space of bars and alcohol and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
People getting
Whereas I
drunk.
was, and I still am, more open to the world in different ways, that I'm just like, I want to share with people, and I'm not gonna, I don't create as many limitations like that.
Yeah.
But back then, it did make sense to me. I was like, okay, let's change track, and we just completely changed direction as a band. We
Right.
moved a
But you
whole
stayed
different
with
way.
the band and continue and then changed direction and moved towards mantra music.
Well,
Is that right?
we changed the name of the band. The band at the time was called Gelbison,
Yep.
and then we,
After that famous
as we
Bondi
both
pizza
had.
joint, for anyone who knows it.
Yes, there is a place that still exists, and we still go to and still eat at.
Velveteen pizza.
Yeah, very homely kind of place. Um, and yeah,
And what
after
did the
that we
band
changed.
become?
The band became Kahn Brothers, which is just the two of
Right.
us,
I remember.
because our paths had changed quite significantly from the paths of the other band members, even though we were always all connected through deep interest in spirituality and different dimensions of existence. That took up a lot of our time on the tour buses around the world. One of our bass player had been a Christian, and our drummer was a Buddhist. And so between us, and we were two Jewish kids at that point in time who were kind of
Yeah.
deeply involved in the whole Vedic world of kind of
Yeah.
other, Hindu stuff and different thoughts. So it was
Yeah.
just very ripe for us for exploring
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right for the world too. So I'm going to come
Mm.
at you with a quite unexpected question, which honestly, had I thought of it before, I would have given you advance warning. But I've
Okay.
just been told by some powers that be that I need to be careful going off writing about mantra because I really want to do write a little bit about mantra and the moon. And
Hmm.
I was told I need to be very careful because of accusations of cultural appropriation. And this is
Mm.
something I've slightly wrestled with for a couple of years because basically my spiritual path is now via India. And
Yeah.
I was raised, a white middle class girl in Hobart, Tasmania. And here I am wanting to chant in Sanskrit and teaching people to chant in Sanskrit, which I do all the time. So, what do you say to that? Like, what do you say to me?
Yeah.
And what do you say to anyone else who accuses you of that? And I'm just going to, before you answer, I'm just going to say, funnily enough, after I had the conversation about this last week, it was, I got into an Uber cab, and the driver was a Hindu guy. He had sort of Hindu stuff all over the altar, all over his dashboard, so I knew. And I said, listen, this has just happened, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? He said, I won't swear, but he said, that's BS. He said,
Yeah,
you should be
right.
taking mantra out to the world. That's what, I believe as a Hindu. But what do you think, Nadav? What's your response to that?
Well, I think he's tapped on something that's very important, which was actually always the agenda of the great masters of the Vedic tradition, in which that school of mantra, because mantra obviously exists in every culture. In some
Yeah.
way or another, mantra and prayer and songs that are repetitive. I mean, I think of mantra as just sounds that are repetitive that bring and enable some sort of expansion of consciousness.
Yeah.
So there's many different ways to approach mantra, not just from a Hindu or Vedic or Indian perspective. So it exists everywhere, firstly. But to be fair, the word mantra, which is made of two words, is a Vedic word, a Sanskrit word. Man and tra together make up mantra, which means a tool or vehicle of the mind. So the
Yeah.
manas is the mind, and basically it's a tool to cut through mind. It's a pathway to get us beyond our constant, incessant thinking to enter something that's deeper, something that's a space within us, which is, we could say it cuts straight to the heart, but it's even deeper than the heart. It's the essence of what we are. It's on some sort of soul level, even though soul can be quite a broadly interpreted word. So mantra in that sense, if you say it as in the more Sanskrit way, is, I guess, comes from the domain of India. And you could say it's an appropriation, but everything in this world is very sensitive these days on so many fronts, as we know.
Yeah.
But the masters of the Vedic tradition had a mission, which was to go and to take these tools and share them with the world. And that's the beauty, or one of the reasons I've been always so drawn to the thinking that came out of what we consider the Hindu tradition, but it's broader than that. It's like really Vedic thought, knowledge of the Vedas, which is really wisdom, tools for wisdom, information that is there to bring wisdom, was always universal. Was never thought of as something just for the people that happen to live in the region which we know as India.
Or
It
happen to have
was
been born there.
yes, it came from there,
But
and that was
it's even stricter than that. It's like, you should leave this to people who are actually Indian, Yasmin.
really. Well, look,
Yeah.
I'll tell you something that's quite funny. I have friends who are brilliant meditation teachers who get invited to India to work and teach there because some Indian parts of the population want to learn from Westerners rather than from Indians,
Wow.
which is really ironic because,
Yeah.
it's like learning tools from India and then coming out and then bring modified or diluted or re-Westernized thinking to it. So everything is paradox, I think, in this world. And so
Yeah.
to start almost accusing or creating that paradigm of appropriation is very tricky, because we've been given these systems, and I know for myself from my teachers who come from India, the encouragement was, and I was told by my teacher at one point in time, Nadav is here and is here to create mantra and chants that will last for generations to come. That's your duty. And I resisted it, of course, because whenever anybody tells me anything, it takes me quite a while to come to terms with it or accept it, and I want to rebel and run away from it. But it took me a while until I digested what this whole system is about and what the opportunity is in it, to realize, oh, of course, this is something to be shared. And the whole world of holding on and to the tools or the systems that we have and creating more separation is not what mantra is about. Mantra is about something that is expansive. So even though absolutely it comes from a particular tradition, from a particular culture, I see it as being a pathway for all of humanity to grow.
Yeah.
And really, it's about evolution of consciousness and possibility for us to become, the best humans that we can, so that we can also treat the planet in the best possible way, and beyond the greater universe and the universe beyond, which I know is your world of looking at
Yeah.
the greater cosmos,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really tools for us to become broader thinkers, not smaller thinkers. And
Yeah.
some of the domain of people really becoming possessive about some ideas, I don't think always fits in with that greater, vaster thinking. Even
Yeah.
though
No,
I do
totally.
completely recognize there's a lot of appropriation and a lot of validity in the need to preserve some cultures and traditions and things that get taken and misused. So that I completely
Yeah.
respect. But
Yeah.
I don't feel like, from my perspective, I feel very humbled to be able to serve and offer what I do in my way through my lens, recognizing that I'm not of however many generations and a lineage that's coming from India, as far as I know, but their whole story also relates to karma. And the karmic model is that our soul is traveling, and what package it has, whether I happen to be coming from a white middle class privileged background, absolutely, and as, living as a male classified as he, him in the world at this point in time, I completely relate to the fact that that brings and creates challenges in other areas. But how do I explain that my path has kind of invited me and called me and keeps keeping me in check through these practices, and has become very clear for me that it is one of my expressions to share and to support wellness in the world, particularly at a time where there's a
Yeah.
lot of challenge and a lot
Yeah.
of mental health, requirements. And I feel like, as far as I can tell, this is a tool for people to bring more clarity, more
Yeah.
insight, and more wisdom into their lives. And
And
so,
to connect with the divine.
and to connect with the divine in whatever way
Yeah.
anyone perceives the divine,
Yeah.
because even that is actually broad, is
Yeah.
really broad. And within the Hindu and Vedic world, it's all metaphor. There's so many metaphors and so many paradigms in which things are explained. And yes, they may have gods and goddesses and different expressions of divine, but it all calls us back to the one, to the oneness of ultimate, connection that binds us all beings, all life force. So I think it's inherent in the teachings that it's for everyone. So for somebody to kind of bring up that feels a little bit limited in thinking from my perspective. But of course, I'd be always open to hearing what someone has to offer, and to exploring that conversation with anybody who feels that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So,
Yeah. So
Nadav,
so just
yeah,
sorry,
go on.
just to kind of finish. My thing is, if you've had insight that ties in with what you do and that links to mantra, I think, and you have an angle and a lens to offer and to share something in a way that doesn't cheapen or minimize or limit what it's about, then by all means, I think you and I have both experienced that beautiful blessing of being shown that here, use and work with these teachings to share them, to
Yeah.
support others.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I feel, and you put it much more beautifully than I do, because I actually feel quite annoyed by the whole thing. I'm more
Right.
like, well, I'm really sorry, but this is my cultural, this is my spiritual journey. Like,
Yeah.
you put it beautifully, but that's basically my path to the divine. So I'm sorry that I
Mm.
wouldn't, but you put it much more beautiful. I must say, no one's criticized me. It's actually been a conversation more about, I won't go into it, but that's a beautiful answer.
Mm.
Thank you.
Well,
So
I would just think, if I were you, how you do it, and knowing you, I know that you bring your wonderful personality, but also respect and a search for truth and insight into everything that
yeah,
you do. So,
100%.
as if that's kind of, in the formative sphere of what you're offering, how can that be a problem, and let
Yeah,
people
no, I
question,
agree.
maybe only if the information can be refuted or something like that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who are listening, let's change tack just a little bit. People who are listening and they're thinking, yeah, okay, mantra, I really want to do it. I don't know how. Is it okay if I do it by myself? What about if I mispronounce it? What's your advice for people like that, Nadav?
Well, I think go with your calling. So, you know, we're in a world where there's so much information and so much available. I mean, I started with the mantras that I heard that attracted me, you know. So you kind of go with what attracts you, and yes, there are so many ways that people are chanting or offering songs or mantra or kirtan. For those of you who know kirtan, which is like just about call and response, or bhajans, which are these songs that are meant to support community and kind of connecting and going deeper, and as you said, kind of connection to divine. So I think honor the calling if you're feeling it, you know, and try eliminate some of the judgmental mind, because mantra is not about that. Mantra is about self-acceptance. So I think, you know, you follow what you're drawn to, and that inadvertently will lead you to some higher learning. And I'm not saying that there are mantras that are, you know, maybe there are people that do it at a higher vibration than others, and maybe there's people with more beautiful voices and less. But actually, spending time in India and being surrounded by so much mantra, all that stuff and all those distinctions really fall away. People are just doing it as a way to connect and to go deeper.
Yeah.
And however that expresses for you, I think, as a person who's possibly interested or wanting to explore it, I just say go for it. You know, it'll
So,
guide you. It will lead you where you need to go.
all right. So, can you give us a little sort of, I don't know, 10-minute morning routine or 20-minute morning routine that people can do? And
Mm,
then we'll talk about actually going to India and this retreat you're going to be running, which I so
yeah.
wish I could come to. And I
I
can't.
wish you
I'm going
could
to be in
come.
the
That would be so
States. Yeah.
beautiful.
Hopefully, you'll do another one next year, maybe. But
Yes. Yeah.
give us a
Well,
little
that's the
idea,
intention.
a little morning routine,
Sure.
and then tell us
Sure.
about India.
Well, look, you know, this is the thing. Mantra is as complex and as simple as you want it to be. And that's why I'm at the moment actually in the process of, and I've started going and bringing mantra into different environments, and taking it out of just the ashrams, the yoga schools, the more temple kind of world. And I'm taking it into corporate spaces. So I'm
Wow.
offering it in ways that are very palatable as well, by just focusing on the essence of mantra. And this is the thing, there's a term that for those who practice mantra already that know, which is called bij or bija mantra. And the bij mantra is
Yeah.
the seed. The seed is the part that is the activating force of a mantra. So it's basically, and the seed in this case happens to be a sonic seed. So we're talking about sound and vibration that has the capacity to activate something within you to expand your seeing the world, or sense of self, or relating to self, or open the heart, or whatever it is that it's there to do. And then mantra becomes quite specific. Some is for health, and some is for abundance, and some is for clearing, you know, the mind. But ultimately, all of it is to bring us into one thing, which is presence, so that we become present to where we're at in any given moment. And
Yeah.
through the experience of becoming more present to ourselves, ideas start coming, and clarity and new possibilities happen in life, because we become bigger than we were a moment before. And so in the morning, if you have 10 minutes, or if you even have 5 minutes, or even 2 minutes, you can even start with, you know, the world's probably most well-known mantra, which I really love. And last year I started a thing based on it, which is the mantra Om. I started a concept last year which called Omtober. And Omtober was to link with the month of October, which is mental health month, and by practicing Om daily. And I offered a full month of mantra meditation just with the sound Om. So, but I would say just take Om, and Om is an expression of all of sound and all of existence. Om is basically a code word for the summation of all of the energy and all of the reverberation of all of life everywhere. And it could be, you can almost close your eyes and imagine from the moment of the Big Bang, from life kind of, and the cosmos and the universe beginning its formation as we understand it, to have this massive resonating Om. And if you start expanding your thinking into that, and it doesn't matter whether you chant it low or if you Om, however, wherever your pitch is or your voice is, Om starts tuning us into a broader frequency. So even just chanting that simplest of sounds, Om, for a period of a few minutes a day could completely change your day, because it can bring absolute presence into your mind. And also what it does is it syncs, it's basically a pranayama practice. So it starts syncing your breath with your voice and then your whole body. So you start falling into a rhythm that's natural to you. And so if you just basically repeat the sound, like let's just do it like 3 times, where you don't have to try push your voice. But should we try it together?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so let's just.
I'm not going to chant. I'm just going to let you chant. I might chop it up and put it throughout the episode.
Okay. So if anyone feels to, just take a deep breath and then release completely, and just make sure that you are relaxed and comfortable where you are. And now do that again. Take another deep breath and release completely, and perhaps let your eyes close for a moment. We'll only do it for about 20 or 30 seconds. Because by closing the eyes again, we centralize our intention inwards. We start letting the outer world fall away. And take one more deep breath and then release completely, even just with the sound of just like just relaxing completely. And now we're going to make the sound of Om 3 times. So breathing in, Om, and breathe in again, Om, Om. And allow yourself to just experience the silence, the quiet that follows the sounding of the sound Om, or the receiving of the sound Om. Because integrated into the sound Om is the silence. The silence is perhaps the most important part of all of mantra. We make the sound to return to silence, to return to stillness. That's the invitation of mantra. We're really using a property of our body, of our vocal capacity as humans, in order to return to the quieter inner space. And that's why I think mantra's for everyone. And that's why Om is universal, and it's beyond where you come from and your lineage and your culture and your tradition.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All
and you
right,
don't have
that
to
was
do it
amazing.
long.
I could just sit here and say nothing now, but I'm not sure that's right for a podcast. But let's just have a moment of silence just to let that just go through us.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, Nadav, tell us about your retreat in India, please.
Okay. Yeah, it's been in my sort of sphere of thinking for many years. And then, of course, the world of COVID and all that happened. So it kind of shelved the idea. But now, as people have been asking me for many years to, would I take them or guide them to India, I finally decided that I'm ready to, and I'm feeling very excited to actually get back there. And so I've created a little inner journey, which is based on mantra and sound, because we're going to be going to a space that is where they chant pretty much round the clock. almost 24 hours a day, there are practices and rituals with mantra. So we're going to go in a space that's steeped in mantra and then work and learn and discover practices through mantra. And by doing it together as a group, of how we get to harmonize both ourselves internally and then collectively one another, and bring to the surface what needs to rise. So it's really going to be just so beautiful. We're going to be going and experiencing Vedic rituals and pujas and all different temples and things like that. But the fact that it's happening within this Hindu context doesn't diminish the fact that this, in my perspective, a pluralistic practice. It's for anyone. You can come and you can be of any faith, any tradition, any religion. It really makes no difference. We're doing something which is a deeper practice for the soul, the part that binds us, not that separates us. And there's not any expectation of anyone to have to become or change who they are or what they do. So we're just going to go and experience deep immersion in mantra and meditation and allow our hearts and voices to soar. So it's going to be
amazing. And on a very practical level, when is it and how long does it last for?
It lasts for sort of 8-9 days. We kind of start the first day. We'll be starting in the city of Chennai, just to help, for people to do a bit of shopping and get a few of the clothes and things that we will make you feel more comfortable in the spaces that we go to, because we're going to a more traditional area in rural India, where activewear isn't really appropriate in the temple. So we kind of we become modest and bring ourselves into that environment respectfully. And then we'll be literally going and experiencing the practices, and then gathering together and doing our own practices. We're going to be staying at a beautiful Ayurvedic center with wholesome, locally grown, organic Ayurvedic food, and some opportunity for some Ayurvedic treatment. So we get to learn about the nature of the body and form in the practice. There'll be some asana and other kriya opportunities. So it's going to be quite broad in that sense, but everything from the perspective of mantra. And my experience with mantra is that it teaches me everything. It keeps bringing me back to understanding life, as a parent, how to parent, and how I even integrate mantra and have from before my children were born into their lives by chanting into the womb and the growing fetus, and then chanting into their lives and into their birth, and then through life. And then we do practices in the morning, just little oms and things and shaloms, bringing the Hebrew stuff into it, in order for them for us to kind of stay still and bring us into more possibility of presence into the days, and it close the day like that at night. And so we'll be learning practices that people can then take away with them, that are really applicable, and understand where they come from and why they're relevant at the same time. But ultimately, beyond all the whys and hows, it's to have an experience, to allow people to have an experience of who they are in that space. And the space is so conducive to it, very high vibration. So, and also we're going at a time which is Navaratri. So we're going to be experiencing a journey which is actually a time of the reverence to the deity, to the divine feminine consciousness. So we're going to be bringing in different aspects throughout being a part of that time of year, which is really an expression of a battle of, good versus evil in a sort of metaphoric sense. So we're talking about our own selves, looking at where do we need to face ourselves, which areas need some recalibration, where is our consciousness limited, where are we stuck, and hopefully having some breakthroughs and discoveries that we can take with us outside of the retreat and bring into life. So
and just to be clear for my regular listeners who know about me going to Peedam, it's actually at the Srinarani Peedam in Tirumala, right? It's the ashram where I'm always talking about, in other words.
Okay. So you talk about it. That's great. So your listeners will already know that this is a very special little place.
Yeah.
And within it, and being in a small rural town, you and I, we've watched it grow, hey, and evolve. And now
Yeah.
there's that phenomenal golden temple, which is a sort of a center for wisdom for the whole of the world, which again, it's the same thing. It's universal wisdom, and also to allow and invite more abundance into people's lives, abundant thinking, abundant relationships, abundant heart space, abundance on the material plane, on every dimension. It's there to invite us into being whole, in every way that we can be, so that
Great.
life
Yeah.
can be
It's going to
the
be
best it can
amazing.
be.
And it's
Yeah,
October, right? Do you know the
it's
exact
in
dates
October.
offhand?
Yes, 18th of October till the 26th.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll get people around the world. How many places do you have in there?
it's limited. So the maximum that we can have is 30 people.
Okay.
So it's not going to be too big. It's going to be nice and still maintain the intimacy, because
Yes.
I want it to be, I don't want it to be massive. I want us to be able to relate to one another and get to know each other as much as people wish to in that context. Of course, and privacy and space is also very much a part of it. So whoever needs their own space will be able to have that. Absolutely. I respect all the different needs that we have.
Yeah.
We're going on a spiritual retreat, so there needs to be time for integration and
So it's going to
personal
be so amazing, guys.
realization.
If you can possibly go. So what's the URL, Nadav? I know it actually. It's mantraInIndia.com, right?
That's right. Yeah.
MantraInIndia.com. Okay. So I'm gonna, once after we hang up, I'm going to ask you to send me something of you chanting one of your favorite chants. Is that going to be okay? Because I'll play us out with that when once we finish talking.
Sure. Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, this is Nadav Khan, amazing mantra mentor. Thank you for being with us. And again, the India retreat, which honestly, I am so upset that I can't make it to. Oh my God. And I literally can't, because I'm doing something in America that I've paid already for a lot of cash. It's just not feasible, but I would almost, but I can't. MantraInIndia.com. Don't miss out. It's going to be amazing.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, and thank you so much for having me. Really, such a treat to be able to catch up with you. It's been so very long.
Yeah, and nadavkhan.com is your website, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll put all that information will be in the show notes. So thanks. Do you want to just put us out with just a nice om or a chant, and then we'll segue into the track from you? Let's just finish with a lovely om, if you don't mind,
Okay.
Nadav. It's just so nice. It
Sure.
reverberates through me all the way across the miles from Sydney to London. Here we go.
Well, you know what? We can finish with, since we've been talking particularly more about the Vedic kind of world, why don't we finish with Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, to help to clear the path for everyone who's listening, for everyone who's
Yeah,
receiving this, because that's a mantra
yeah.
for wisdom, a mantra for insight, a
The
mantra to
Dragonisha
just
mantra.
enable us to kind of, wherever you go today and for the rest of your days, may the path just clear before you and enable you to really fulfill all of your dreams and all of your wishes, and keep discovering and keep growing. So I'll finish with a couple of repetitions of that.
Thanks, Nadav.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yasmin. Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Mainly Moonology podcast. If you'd like to stay updated with the moon and moonology and astrology and all the other things we cover, be sure to subscribe to the podcast via Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You'll be notified whenever a new episode is up. Also, it would mean a lot to me and my team if you could leave us a glowing 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice, please. That actually helps more people find us too, which spreads the love and surely also brings you amazing karma for taking a moment to help us out and to help other people find the podcast. Have a great week, and I hope to speak to you next week. Lots of love.